So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today to give your input on plans to remodel the space for teens at the Glendale Central Library. Our team is excited to hear your thoughts and incorporate your input on what you would want to see in the space. I'm Gary Schaefer, Director of Glendale Library Arts and Culture, and I'm joined today by Nicole Passini, our Assistant Director for the library, Hala Shanuda, our Principal Administrator, Tiffany Barrios, who heads up our adult and teen services, as well as the team from our beloved architects, Johnson Favreau. Steve Johnson joins us, as does Kevin Garrity. On March 9th, 2021, City Council awarded a professional services agreement to Johnson Favreau, LLP, for architectural and engineering services for a remodel of the children's and teen space at the Central Library. Today, we'll be focusing on the teen space. We held an event on Thursday evening to talk about the children's space. Public Works here at the city, Johnson Favreau and Glendale Library Arts and Culture have moved this project through the phases of evaluating the present state of the spaces, verifying programmatic needs, defining zones, etc. We are still very early in the design process, and this is the perfect time to get your input on the direction of the design for the new spaces. Today, we'll be focusing again on presenting preliminary plans for the creation of an exciting new teen space for youth ages 13 to 18. There will be many opportunities for you to share your opinions and feedback on the planning of the spaces where you can hang out, study, plan, and experiment. If you are a parent or adult who works with teens, you're welcome to join and listen, or you have teens. And we ask that you also give the teens here the space to speak up as well. I will now pass the virtual mic to Steve Johnson, Principal at Johnson Favreau. Steve.
Hello, everyone. I really wish I could meet all of you in person. So I do thank you on a beautiful afternoon to take your time to review with us the progress, the design progress for the teen space. One thing, just starting, if people could raise hands of who's a teenager in the audience, it helps me to just know that. It'd be really helpful if you're able to. Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. I love knowing that you're in attendance, because in the end, this is for you, and I do want to hear from you. It's a little bit of context about the schedule that for this process. As Dr. Schaefer said, we are in the design phases now. So the preliminary design phases kind of come generally to a conclusion roughly the 1st of October, and then we go into a construction document phase that takes us through to the end of the year, with the plan being that we would submit those documents to your building department to initiate the permit process. But as I said, the most important reason why I'm here today is to hear from you, to know about you. I don't pretend that all of the people on this call today represent your friends or everyone your age in the community, but it's super valuable to our team to get to know you, because in the end, this is for you, and understanding who you are and what you like, how you see the world, what interests you, what catches your attention as you engage in design and fashion and environments and places. This is really critical for us to know how you like to meet people, where you like to spend your time, what type of environment makes sense to you, what matters to you, and how what matters to you affects your view of the environment. And that's not just the planet, which is, of course, the important environment, but this is a design process for a building and environment. So how your interests, how what you feel strongly about affects how you think about the building environment, a space that would be designed for you in terms of materials, in terms of color, in terms of sensibility, what attracts your attention, what to you is pleasing and fits the kind of place that you want to make your own. Because in the end, the point of this is that it is a place that has identity, that reflects your interest and who you are. And the world is wide open out there. And what I know for sure is that you are the future. And basically, we know that popular culture in some ways is dependent on your contribution in fashion, art, graphic design. You drive popular culture. So knowing what interests you is key in this process. So I want to start a little bit globally and show you a picture of the building as a whole in ways that you might not be used to. This is a site plan of the library building. And why I'm showing the site plan is because we do have to think outside of the box, literally outside of the actual existing library. So here's a site plan of the library with East Harvard at the top and the parking structure, the primary parking structure that serves it. Why this is important is confirming and understanding how everyone enters the library and how everyone experiences the spaces where they park. And why that also matters, just to assure you, one of our obligations, even though this is an interior design, interior renovation, we do have to ensure that accessibility is maintained with current disabled access code. So how and where you park and how you enter the building, and that way you enter remains accessible is a part of our endeavor. But it's also to let you know there is a project happening, which is a redevelopment of a portion of the park just to the south of the library. Simply put, the park is being brought up to the library, which we think is beneficial. That's great for it, but it does remove parking in that area. So the nature and character of that entrance possibly changes. Here you're looking at a ground floor of the existing library, the red box in the center being the double height Great Hall with the Harvard at the top with the north entrance, the south entrance that I referred to that will now be accessed from the park. On the east side of the building is an entrance primarily used by staff, but also for auditorium and events also after hours, and the two elevators that serve the space. Just for orientation, the two spaces that are the subject of this design effort, the children's space, which we talked about the other night, and today, the teen space, they're easily visible from essentially the Great Hall. And that's one of the wonderful things about this building in terms of two things, basically wayfinding. You can see how visually prominent the teen space is and will be, and how it is central to the library. And we're also looking at ways in which to open up the children's space in the same way so that these two important constituencies can see where they are in the library and see the wonderful activities that are associated with that. The space as it exists, I think it's actually a wonderful space. It's kind of, even though it has a low ceiling height, and that's necessary because there's mechanical equipment and ductwork above that ceiling, so we can't do a lot about that. We can modify it in some ways. But I think it's kind of wonderfully situated with these great views to the south, to the park, and then the light, the borrowed light, if you will, and the access to the Great Hall to the north. But one of the challenges is, and you can see it in this photo that you know is soundscape. An important part of the programming of this space is behind that solid wall, which is a concrete shear wall. And one of our goals in this project is how to more actively connect that important program activity to this space. I would note that even during COVID, as we've been getting to know your building, I see evidence of how this space is critical to the use by teens and by others, but in particular teens. And I take note of this photograph because it really shows something that may seem old-fashioned when it comes to libraries, but a big part of what is important about a teen space, this library, is that having a place to sit, possibly put your headphones on, engage in head-down work at a table with your devices and your books and your notes is still and will remain an important part of any thing here. And that really is a segue to understanding how we as architects look at a space like this, because we do know, all of us, but especially teens, we don't sit and work and study and congregate in the same ways we used to when I was growing up. So for example, we all know in the upper left-hand corner, the idea of a community table where I can both be alone, but alone together is the kind of space that many people want. The bottom right, we know, or bottom left, kind of cafes, we know have become the equivalent of places to work, places to study, where I can be with friends or I can concentrate on my work. These are the kinds of environments that current contemporary libraries understand as being the ways forward in how we more actively give people options to flexibly occupy their space. The middle center, I do know from business meetings take place there. It may look like a relaxed kind of lobby, but Gone are the days that we always have to meet at a table in upright chairs to have a meeting or to accomplish work. So how we sit in this library, how you sit in this library, and giving you the option to flexibly adjust it to meet your needs is an important part. And in the lower right, as I said, that's never going away. The ability within this space to engage in kind of heads down concentrated work is and always will be a part of library. It's important to note from the beginning that also gone are the days where we have to find the one outlet in the space to plug into for power. It is our obligation through this renovation to provide power to every area within the library. And that's a particular challenge given the flexibility that I'm going to be showing to you, but it's bringing it to the desktop, to the tabletop, no crawling on the floor to do it. It's basically enabling you to power, and supported by Wi-Fi. Technology comes to you. You're not taking your device or your work any place to connect. It's actually there for you to connect to in the way. We're doing that, it's a little bit in the weeds, but we're doing that by essentially distributing electrical power in a thin layer below essentially a subfloor in this area so that we can accommodate the flexibility that I'm going to be talking to you about, but also ensure that we do provide it everywhere that it is needed. And even in this image in the lower middle, even we may need some areas where we need to bring it that last extra few feet to make it convenient. The message to you, technology is not of use if I can't access it. So our job is to put in the physical infrastructure to enable that to happen. So the existing space, it's about 2,500 square feet. This is a blow up of the plan. The Great Hall or the north is to the top of the page. The park is to the south. One of the first observations, which you know well, is that's closet is really not suitable for soundscape or for recording and mixing activities. There are a lot of issues with it. And as I'd mentioned, it's kind of forced into that space due to that large concrete shear wall, which is very hard to deal with in terms of providing a connection between the main room and soundscape. So a very early decision was to essentially convert that area to table and chair storage. And really, multifunction is only multifunctional when you have the ability to store things and move things in and out. So a part of this exercise for us is ensuring that your staff and you have enough room to move things out of the room to reconfigure it in the ways that are needed to satisfy all of the incredible programming that will go on in this space. It will also serve the auditorium. So we've essentially taken what was the shape of a closet and returned it back to its best function, which is a closet, a storage area. And in so doing, we're going to create a brand new recording booth of some size so we can get a few individuals in there and a control room. And then adjacent to that will essentially be a gaming area with a video wall. All of this is to accommodate the important podcast, studio recording, mixing activities that would go on in a state-of-art facility like this so that we do that. But we also want to expose it. This is an important activity, and I think seeing what's going on in there and connecting the two rooms is important. And we're going to do so. On the right, you see a full-on recording studio, and there is technology with glazing systems now today that we can give that vision, that connection, but essentially create the acoustical separation we need between the spaces within the teen space as well as between the teen space itself and the library. So you can actually make noise in there and not disrupt the library. And it's really done quite simply with essentially a glass system that's 2 layers of glass separated by 2 to 3 inches of airspace. This is the way in which we can ensure that we acoustically separate the activities in this space. On the other side of the room is similarly other acoustically separated rooms that are for group meetings, collaboration. There's a 4-seat group meeting room as well as an 8-seat. This enables you again to go into a space, close the door, collaborate with your friends on a project, separate your activities from the other activities so that neither are you disturbed by what's going on in the room at large or vice versa, what you're doing on there. And again, it's supported by technology with monitors that are accessed through the tabletop so that it's of use to you. So all of that, the 2 fixed conditions at the end, let's call them fixed because they involve installing acoustically separating glass, and they have technical requirements that don't lend themselves to moving. on the one hand, the control room and the recording booth, and on the other, the two collaboration. Between that area are all of the kinds of spaces within this space that give us that ability to work and be in the room in the way that we want to. So for example, starting in the upper left-hand corner, the community table, which has both benches and seating that allows for that, whether I want to work alone but be with people or collaborate with people, I can do so there. Similarly, on the other side, that's all movable furniture, but we're showing a seating configuration that's also an area for collaboration. Back to what I said, not everyone sits at a hard table with a hard back chair. They sit in looser arrangements. They pull chairs around into a group, around an ottoman. That's also a collaborative space that's movable and flexible. The gaming, a little bit more fixed, again, because it's tied to the media wall. But also movable chairs that give it its kind of distinct space. And then towards the southern perimeter is really the area for, again, that kind of little bit more of a heads down. These are the places where you can sit at a table, you can spread out some materials, you can have your device, and you can focus on your work. All of that's around an area in the middle that's much more flexible. So I'm going to show you a little bit of, and one thing I would note, if you'll notice how this slide, we also have a glass wall and sliding door system that separates the hallway that runs along the Great Hall so that it can either open as you see here, or we can close it to completely enclose the room. But here you see the room set up for a presentation or for a meeting or for a film. And we can even use the community table as a head table for a panel discussion or for a speaker. And that room will be supported by a motorized screen that will come down and a short throw projector that will facilitate, again, audiovisual support for that presentation. We can arrange the tables that are kept in the storage in a kind of seminar or meeting format as well within the center of the room. We can even organize it for almost instruction, if you will, or test prep. So in other words, again, someone at the head, supported again by the presentation technology, we can utilize the center of the room. We can even open the doors and set it up for an exhibition. You can actually use the room as a place to display and exhibit, whether it's art or projects or other things that are going on. And then finally, or not finally, there's many other things to do. You can kind of really move things around, close the doors, and essentially have battle of the bands or play music from the control booth, et cetera, in order to turn the whole room essentially into the event space, acoustically separated from the library. So what does it look like? So at the beginning, I said, I need to know about you to get to what it looks like. So we have to start somewhere. So I'm going to share with you our thinking of what the building looked like. And it has to start, every architect has to start with context. What does the existing, we're not building a brand new building, we're renovating and adding to an existing building. And it turns out you're in possession of a building of interest, architectural interest, historical architectural interest. It was designed by Welton Beckett, a kind of notable California architect who did many landmarks in the Los Angeles area. He completed it in 1973. And it's an example, probably a little bit weedsy for all of you, but it's an example of brutalist architecture. And here's a case where I think the Wikipedia definition is as good as anything I got in school. It's a style, if you will, that showcases the bare building materials and structural elements over decorative design. It kind of flourished in the 1950s, pretty much after the World War, Second World War, where Britain had to build a lot of buildings fast. And they kind of threw out the idea of let's not deal with this fancy decoration and ornamentation. Let's get down to the basics and build a bunch of buildings that are all about an expression of raw architecture, meaning building materials, form follows function. So what you see in the building that you have is a good example of that, a rational structural system, kind of muscular structural system, if you will. And it's even called in to support lighting. So the two, again, that sort of form and function called in together. And so it is a defining characteristic of that building and of Welton Beckett's work throughout Southern California. So here you see an early picture of the library after it's completed. It's worth noting, relative to the endeavor we're engaged in now, that you have renovated it. And in my opinion, you've humanized it. which is important given that definition I gave you about moving away from ornament and decoration. But you can kind of see in these two slides, just opening up the second floor as you have in a previous renovation contributes a lot to actually increasing not only the visibility of the building, but the appreciation of its significant architectural stature, if you will. So this is a serious building of some substance, and it is tied to a whole series of buildings around the country that Mr. Beckett was looking at: raw concrete, exposed structure. Here's a library in Berlin that clearly built prior to your library. You can kind of see the similarity as a kind of rational structure. Again, lighting and lighting design and kind of tied to the actual structural design of the building. The idea of one benefit, as I mentioned, abundant natural light coming into both of these facilities. So this is truly the character that we are tasked with adding onto, and how do we bring it forward? So that really is the key question. Given what I said at first, what are your interests? How do we make this space, which we have to all agree right now as it exists now, is kind of a little bland, meaning the teen space itself, a little bland, there's kind of no there. How do we add to this building in a way that makes it a meaningful space for you? And so one thought that came to us is, what was going on in the 70s when this building was built? How were buildings completed, if you will? If they were devoid of finish and materials, what was going on? And some of it was silly, but I also look at the 70s as a super interesting period where, yeah, we were in a tumultuous political climate, but there was a kind of optimism about the future. The space program was literally taking off. And so you see in this image here a kind of combination of both the old world, but also the new. And there was a really optimism about the future and about what that would be, and making things new. There was a boldness to it. Those of you that were alive then, like I was, super graphics were a big way of essentially demonstrating that boldness. Again, you see the patterns, some pretty interesting, I would even say groovy furniture. These are kind of the hallmarks. I think it was actually an interesting period in design. Here's a building, actually, it's not your building, and apologies for the quality of the photograph, but it was the 70s after all, so the photography is not great, but it's very similar to your building. But I want to convey to you, they weren't timid about essentially how you went beyond that structural expression when it came to color, to furnishings, to other things. So I think it's a path forward. You can again see here, even the inclination with these bare bone buildings that I've described, the introductions of textiles, color, pattern, all of these are the techniques that I think are interesting to us. And in fact, when you look at the historical pictures at the library, this is the children's room. Look at the pattern of that carpet. That's bold. It actually obviously worked with the building at its inception. That thing in the upper middle is a chair, and it's an incredible chair. And look at those kids enjoying that chair. I have to say, as a digression, I can't find library furniture like this. This is pretty magnificent library furniture, pretty interesting furniture. But my point to you with this is that we can be bold. This is a building of substance. It can take something, and it can hold it. It's actually a really good substantial shell in which we can explore how to make this your teen space. So it's back to the question of what interests you, what interests us as we move forward in the world of design. How can we introduce the kinds of things that are of interest to us? Because in the end, human beings need visual interest, and then decoration really didn't go away as the brutalists thought. We depend on that. It makes our life more interesting and better. So with that in mind, and also graphics. Graphics can be a part of that. I particularly like the sort of pictograms, the importance of words in defining an area, et cetera, so that we have many tools at our disposal in terms of making this space. We've done this before. This is a much smaller teen library within the Costa Mesa library that we just completed, but you'll notice again how we utilize pattern and coloring and to make a space that they see as their own. Another one we just completed for the city of Riverside, using kind of bold patterned wall coverings in which to see it. This one, as you can see, actually has a much smaller recording booth than yours. Yours is much more going to be state of the art than that. But again, an example of how we have done this before. So with that, I'm going to share with you, kind of walk through a few renderings that just show some ideas of how we're looking at the space. Starting, we're With this view, we're kind of at the head of the stairs that take you from the Great Hall up to the second floor. Luckily, and I think wonderfully, the teen space is right there. And we like the idea that soundscape, and I'm just floating the idea, not my choice, but perhaps we think about the name so that it can be shorthanded and become a kind of landmark destination, possibly Sound Lab, for example. I don't know, that's not my call. But the idea that the graphics that announce that space and the activity in that space is something that signals what's going on here and makes it visible to all people who use the library. At the far end, you're seeing evidence of the two collaboration rooms with the more flexible area in the middle. Now turning to a view, we're all the way standing in front of the two group study rooms or collaborative rooms, looking back to soundscape on the left. Kind of those colored panels are actually the beginning of studying how we accomplish acoustical treatment in a recording studio. The door cracked open is the door to the control room, and immediately to the right is the a gaming area with the large video wall for that activity. Along the southern perimeter, you see essentially the tables that are used for a little bit more heads down, but it doesn't preclude someone pulling a chair up and working with someone else at that table. That's again a flexibility there. You're seeing again the doors open on the left to the Great Hall, but those can be closed. And again, the community table in the foreground. Flipping to the other side, essentially looking across the kind of collaborative lounge seating area to the community table with, again, the kind of study tables, if you will, along the southern perimeter wall, looking into the two collaborative rooms. Utilizing kind of the amazing things, we do a lot of this using simple vinyl wall coverings and other coverings to print imagery that we can both design and that we can utilize to essentially give this space its special character. So I look forward to a conversation with you. Thank you for attending today. And we're really thrilled about the project and excited about making a new space for you.